On June 20th, 2001 at 9:48 a.m. in Houston, Texas, the law enforcement authorities received a call from a woman named Andrea Yates, who told the operator that she was ill and needed a police officer at her house. However, when the police officers arrived at Yates's house, they discovered something horrifying. Yates was seemingly well, but all her 5 children were laying dead in front of her. What was even more shocking was the fact that the children hadn't been murdered by anyone else, but their mother had taken their lives one by one. Why did Andrea Yates kill her children, and how did she do it? This is the case of Andrea Yates, who destroyed her perfectly happy family and shocked the entire nation with the reason why she did it. Andrea Yates was born to Andrew Emmett Kennedy and Jutta Karen Kohler, a German immigrant. A German immigrant is Andrea Pia Kennedy in Houston, Texas on June 2, 1964. She was the youngest of 5 children of Andrew and Judah. Andrea was a perfectionist, and it was quite evident when she graduated from Milby High School in 1982 as the class valedictorian, an officer in the National Honor Society, and captain of the school's swim team. After completing a 2-year pre-nursing program at the University of Houston and graduating from the University of Texas Health Science Center, Andrea worked as a registered nurse at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center from 1986 to 1994. In 1989, Andrea Kennedy met a NASA engineer, Russell Yates. Both of them were 25 years old at the time. The two started seeing each other, and their love grew for one another over time. On April 17, 1993, nearly 4 years after seeing each other for the first time, Andrea Kennedy and Russell Yates got married. Both Andrea and Russell were devout Christians. Therefore, soon after marrying, they announced to their friends and families they would have as many children as God would allow. A part of this thought came from the teachings of a man named Michael Warrenecki, who mostly preached in colleges and told the female students that they would go to hell if they continued to study because their life purpose was only to reproduce. Russell and Andrea even purchased a 4-bedroom house in Friendswood, Texas, to accommodate their soon-to-be big family. In February 1994, the couple welcomed their first child, a son whom they named Noah. Shortly after Noah's birth, Russell accepted a job in Florida, and the family had to move to a small trailer in Seminole for some time. In December 1996, a second child, John, was born to Russell and Andrea. Before the birth of their third child in 1997, Paul, the Yates family had to move back to Houston and were living in a GMC motorhome. Despite being a bright student and a happy wife, Andrea had a problem. She was suffering from depression and bulimia. She even used to discuss the concept of suicide with her friends during her high school years. The symptoms of her depression disappeared for some time when she met Russell Yates and married him. But as time passed and Yates gave birth to the couple's 4th child, Luke, symptoms of her depression resurfaced. The first major episode happened on June 16, 1999, when Russell found Andrea shaking and chewing her fingers. But this was just the start. The next day, Andrea attempted to take her own life by overdosing on pills. Her condition got so critical that she had to be hospitalized, and the doctors put her on antidepressants. But the medication didn't improve her condition, and soon after she was released from the hospital, she made an unusual request to Russell. Andrea begged her husband that she should let her die, and even held a knife to her neck while she made the request. She had to be hospitalized once again, and this time the doctors gave her several medications, including an antipsychotic drug called Haldol. The new medications immediately improved her condition, and she was prescribed Haldol when she was discharged from the hospital. After the incident, Russell Yates thought it might not be a good idea to live in the GMC motorhome anymore, so he moved the family into a house to help his wife recover. Initially, the change in the residence seemed to work, and Andrea's condition stabilized. However, this improvement proved to be temporary when, in July 1999, Andrea Yates suffered from a nervous breakdown. As a result, she attempted to commit suicide twice and had to undergo 2 psychiatric hospitalizations that summer. After examining her, the doctors diagnosed her with postpartum psychosis. Seeing Andrea's condition, Dr. Eileen Starbranch, Andrea Yates' first psychiatrist, asked Russell Yates not to have any more children, as it could worsen his wife's mental health. But just 7 weeks after Andrea was discharged from the hospital, the couple conceived their 5th child, Mary. As soon as she conceived, Andrea stopped taking Haldol to ensure a healthy pregnancy. In March 2000, around the time Mary Yates was born, and for a year after, Andrea Yates' condition seemed to have improved greatly, until her father died on March 12, 2001. She couldn't control her psychotic tendencies afterwards, which resulted in her mutilating herself and stopping to feed Mary. Her condition was so bad that the family decided to immediately hospitalize her on April 1st, 2001, and she was released after treatment. Seeing his wife's unstable condition, Russell asked his mother to come live with them for a while to help with the kids. A month after being admitted to the hospital, Andrea Yates once again started showing abnormal tendencies. On May 3rd, 2001, she filled the bathtub in the middle of the day. When her mother-in-law asked her about the reason why she was filling the bathtub, Andrea told her that she might have use for it. This vague answer was frightening and made the Yates family so concerned that Russell and his mother arranged for her to be hospitalized within the next 24 hours. When the incident was shared with her psychiatrist, her thought was an attempt to commit suicide by drowning herself. Andrea was released from the hospital after a few days, but was just as disoriented as before. So her husband took her back to Devereux Hospital and told the doctors that Andrea was no longer responding to the medications. 45 days after she showed serious catatonic tendencies, and 2 days after her last appointment with her doctor, Andrea Yates did something far worse than committing suicide. After her husband left for work, Andrea Yates filled the bathtub with water, took her children to the bathtub one by one, and drowned them in an apparent attempt to save them from evil. Her son Noah even tried to resist, but she put his head back in the water until he was no longer breathing. As for the youngest of her children, Mary, Andrea placed her in Luke's arms, thinking that this would also reunite the two in the next world, where the elder brother will be looking after his baby sister. Once all the kids had been drowned, Andrea Yates put their bodies under the blanket on the bed one by one, as if they were resting. On June 20th, 2001 at 9:48 a.m., Andrea made a 911 call and asked the operator to send an officer to her house. The operator, not sure about what had happened, tried to confirm the reason for Andrea's request by asking her if she was having a disturbance, feeling ill, or if there was another reason for calling 911. Andrea Yates told the operator that she was ill. The operator, following the normal protocol, asked Yates if she needed an ambulance to take her to the hospital. Yates replied by saying that she needed a police officer at her house. The operator once again tried to determine the exact problem Andrea Yates was having, but she told the operator that she just needed the police to come to her house. Andrea's tone and her responses made the operator think it might be a cause of domestic abuse, so she tried to confirm if Andrea's husband was at home, to which Yates said no. Officer Frank Stumpo of the Houston Police Department was assigned to Andrea Yates' call, and he started driving towards her house. 8 minutes after calling 911 and asking for a police officer, Andrea Yates called her husband, Russell Yates, at 9:56 a.m. and asked him to come home. A sudden call from Andrea, who had a long history of depression, made Russell worried, so he immediately went home. When Officer Frank reached Andrea Yates' house, his colleague, Officer David, was already there and told him it was a homicide case. Upon entering the house, Officer Frank found Andrea Yates sitting on the couch in the living room. While entering the bedroom, he expected to see the dead body of a man, but was shocked to see 4 kids lying dead under a blanket. He was still trying to comprehend exactly what happened when he entered the bathroom, and was shocked to find a 5th child floating in the bathtub. Andrea Yates had drowned all 5 of her children in the bathtub. Russell Yates arrived at his home being sealed by the police. Although the officers present at the scene told him what had happened, he didn't allow them to go inside and look at the bodies. Andrea Yates was immediately taken into custody, and the investigators started finding reasons why a mother would kill 5 of her children, including a 6-month-old baby. As her interviews began with the police, Andrea Yates never denied that she killed her children. She even told the investigating officers that the reason why she filled the bathtub with water was because she wanted to drown her children. When the medical experts visited Andrea in the facility where she was being detained and interacted with her, they discovered that, before the incident, Andrea had heard the TV talking to her. One of Andrea's religious beliefs was that the number 666 had been branded into her scalp, and since the number was Antichrist, it made Andrea think that she was a bad mother. On the medical front, one of the experts was able to identify Andrea Yates' condition as cacodemoniomania, a belief that one is possessed by a demon. It was a rare condition that happened in people with religious delusions. Andrea loved her children, but the supposed message she was getting from the TV and her religion was that she was Satan, a bad person. Yates' psychotic tendencies soon tied with her religious beliefs, and there was no coming back after that. Some of Andrea's beliefs were also influenced by Michael Warrenecki's writings, the preacher the Yates once followed. As her condition worsened, Andrea started believing that one of her sons would become a serial killer, and that the other one was going to be a homosexual prostitute. Similarly, she believed that the other 3 children were also going to end up as bad people and would go to hell for their sins. When the investigators asked Andrea if she believed she was possessed by a devil or Satan, she said she was possessed by Satan, who was giving her directions to harm the children. As soon as the news of the 5 kids being found dead in a house was out, it spread like wildfire, and one name that was on everyone's lips was Andrea Yates. People were increasingly interested in knowing about one particular topic: postpartum psychosis. As for her lawyer, George Parnham, he knew that the only way Andrea was going to survive the trial was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Meanwhile, the public outrage was growing as the trial progressed and new details about the case emerged. People, unaware of the effects of mental illness, were harsh towards Andrea Yates, whereas the mental health experts were worried that Yates might be prosecuted despite a legitimate mental illness issue. Andrea Yates's actions were incomprehensible for everyone aware of the case, but it was yet to be established whether or not she was mentally insane. There was no legal definition of mental insanity at the time, which meant the jurors had to use the everyday meaning of the term to decide Andrea's fate. As for the public reaction, Andrea Yates wasn't the only one being criticized for her actions. People were irked by her husband, Russell Yates' reaction to the murders too. The reason was that Russell Yates was defending his wife in the media and telling people that Andrea wasn't herself when she killed their children and was motivated by her mental illness. He also frequently said that Andrea was a loving and caring mother and didn't deserve to be punished for the horrific crimes she had committed. The public turned furious against Russell Yates, especially after the funeral of the kids, which happened 1 week after the murders. The reason for that public anger was that he didn't show the kind of emotions a grieving father would normally show in the case of the death of his 5 children. Some people in the community even believed that he was also involved in the killings with his wife. Before her trial began, Andrea Yates was placed in the jail's medical facility and was treated for psychosis. On the 22nd of September 2001, 3 months after the incident, she was deemed fit to be tried for killing her children. As for Andrea Yates' trial, the state of Texas was going to try the case to the full extent of the law, and it was very clear from the opening statement that the prosecutors who sought nothing less than the death penalty for murdering her 5 children. The prosecution also wanted to prove that Russell Yates was complicit in the incident because he had made his family live in a bus and put his children through homeschooling, which made Andrea's condition worse. In February 2002, Andrea Yates' trial began. When it came to Andrea Yates and her defense, she pleaded not guilty. The reason her defense gave for pleading not guilty was insanity. While only a small number of people were excused from committing a crime because of their severe mental illness, the defense thought it had a case to make by proving that Andrea Yates was also one of those people who, at times, didn't have any control over their thoughts or actions. Different prominent psychiatrists were brought in both by the prosecution and the defense to testify their argument's favor and make their case strong. Dr. Park Dietz testified from prosecution, and Dr. Philly Resnick was brought in by the defense. The experts agreed on several points, including the fact that Andrea Yates drowned her children under the influence of a number of different mental diseases. Dr. Dietz and Dr. Resnick also agreed that Andrea believed that what she was doing while killing her children was in their best interest. The experts also thought that Andrea was well aware that drowning her children was against the law. The only difference between the testimonies of Dr. Resnick and Dr. Dietz was that despite knowing she was doing a criminal act, she decided to proceed with it because she thought it was the right thing to do, especially for her children. Dr. Dietz also talked about where Andrea got inspiration for her actions. According to Dr. Dietz, in the week of the incident, Andrea watched an episode of the Law & Order show in which a woman frees herself from her responsibilities by drowning her children. Not only this, the woman gets away with the murder. Dietz told the court that Andrea might also have thought that she would get away with killing her children. The prosecution argued that there was a method to Andrea's act, and it wasn't all madness. The crux of Dr. Dietz's testimony was that what Andrea did was not just against the law, it was against society and against God as well. During the trial, Andrea Yates' doctor, Dr. Saeed, was also repeatedly mentioned by Russell Yates and his family. According to the Yates family, Dr. Saeed played a part in the tragedy by improperly prescribing her a combination of antidepressants a few days before the tragic incident happened. The trial went on for 3 weeks, and at the end of it, the jury deliberated for nearly 4 hours before coming out with their verdict. On March 15, 2002, Andrea Yates was found guilty of murdering her 5 children. Despite Dr. Resnick's testimony that Andrea Yates was psychotic, Texas law required that the defendant have to prove that they could differentiate between right and wrong in order to be executed under the insanity defense. When it came to the punishment, the jury rejected the prosecution's request for the death penalty and sentenced Andrea Yates to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 40 years. Andrea was sent to Mount View Unit in Gatesville, Texas, which was a psychiatric prison for criminally insane convicts. 2 years after her conviction, in August 2004, Andrea Yates' husband, Russell Yates, officially filed for divorce, saying that he and his wife hadn't lived together as a happy couple since Andrea murdered their 5 children. The family court granted his request for divorce in March 2005, and Russell Yates married another woman named Laura Arnold in 2006. Soon after the verdict in Andrea Yates' case was announced and the public became aware of it, the word quickly started spreading that the Law & Order episode that Dr. Dietz mentioned in his testimony did not even exist. Andrea's lawyers quickly started searching for the episode Dr. Dietz had referred to, but couldn't find any. This meant the defense had gotten a lifeline and could now ask for a retrial based on the discovery. Susan O'Malley, a journalist and an author, had been covering Andrea Yates' trial for NBC News, the New York Times Magazine, and the Oprah Magazine. She had previously written for Law & Order, the show Dr. Dietz had mentioned in his testimony, and also reported that no such episode of the show existed. George Parnham had a meeting with Law & Order's creator, Dick Wolf, who told him that no episode of such sort had been aired on the show, and neither had it ever been planned. Parnham filed for a mistrial, but to his surprise, the motion was denied. So, the defense started preparing for the appeal and reversal of the verdict, and at the center of this motion was Dr. Park Dietz's questionable testimony. When Dr. Dietz was confronted by George Parnham about his mention of the Law & Order show, he told him that it was an honest mistake he had made while testifying. George Parnham highlighted 19 points in his request for a retrial, and based on Dr. Dietz's errored testimony, Andrea Yates was given another chance to have her case heard. In the new trial, the defense didn't request a reduction in Andrea's sentence, but rather filed for an outright dismissal of all the charges against her and argued it would be double jeopardy if Andrea Yates were to go through a second trial. 3.5 years after the original conviction, in January 2005, the Texas Court of Appeals issued an opinion that double jeopardy did not apply to Andrea Yates' case. The Texas Court of Appeals also announced that, despite this, a new trial would be granted to Andrea Yates because Dr. Dietz had admitted to giving false testimony during the initial trial. On January 9, 2006, another plea of not guilty by reason of insanity was entered by Andrea Yates, who requested the court to be released on bail. In light of the appellate court's ruling, Andrea Yates' conviction was overturned, and she was released on bail on February 1, 2006. In light of the bail conditions, Andrea's attorney had her moved from the Mount View unit to Rusk State Hospital so she could be treated there while awaiting her second trial. Meanwhile, the defense prepared for the trial and had another important task at hand: educate the public about what exactly happened and how Andrea Yates wasn't the monster like the general perception was about her. Andrea's lawyers during the media interviews told people that there were 6 victims in the case. 5 were the children, and 1 was Andrea herself, because she didn't have any control over herself, as her mental condition had worsened by the time the unfortunate incident happened. 5 years after the tragedy, in June 2006, Andrea Yates' second trial began, and the defense focused on 2 points: mental health and wrongfulness. By this point, public opinion had also become neutral about the case. When the trial concluded in 2006, the jury deliberated for 3 days before coming to their final decision. It was one of the few trials when jurors asked for the pictures of the children murdered by Andrea and observed a 2-minute silence for each of the 5 victims, with some jurors even crying while seeing the pictures. All eyes were on the court and jury for the verdict in the retrial. After 5 years, 1 month, and 6 days, the jury, after 13 hours of deliberation, found Andrea Yates not guilty by reason of insanity. Andrea Yates' husband was happy after the verdict and told the media that the court had finally given a verdict that his wife deserved, considering her disturbed mental condition. According to the court's verdict, Andrea Yates was placed under the jurisdiction of the Department of State Health Services and was moved to the Vernon campus of the North Texas State Hospital. She was moved to the Kernville State Hospital, a low-security mental facility, where she currently resides. As for her release, there's no specific schedule for that, and she might have to spend the rest of her life in a hospital.